English language teaching. Under the covers.
Hello and welcome to ELT Under the Covers, ELT React, where we, education professionals, look at the good, the bad, and the ugly of teaching on the internet. And today we look at maybe possibly the ultimate teacher, the alpha male of teachers, Mr. Garrison. But first, introductions. I'm Neil of Team Teacher.
Hello everybody, it's Professor Reach.
Best teacher ever?
Unlikely. I'm going to say, well, first of all, there is a big question as to whether this will actually even go up on YouTube or get the channel banned. I'm a big SouthPark. I'm a big SouthPark fan. I love pork from the South, and I'm also a big SouthPark fan.
Yeah.
It was probably one of my favorite things as a young adult. So Mr. Garrison is, if I remember rightly, kind of egotistical, self-obsessed teacher, doesn't really care at all about actually teaching. And I think in some episodes he does have kind of the stereotypical state school teacher who doesn't care. And then in other episodes, it goes a bit further where he not only doesn't care, but like actively acts like a bad teacher, maybe talking about his love life or just telling people to like shut the hell up in class and stuff like that. Yeah, he's really childish, isn't he, as well? That's another thing. Like he's like more childish than the kids.
Okay, children, let's take our seats. Let's get back to our lessons on grammar, shall we?
Mr. Garrison?
Okay, does anybody remember where we left off? No? All right, who can tell me what an adjective is? Thanks, you can go now, I'm back. Who can tell me what an adjective is?
Aren't you running for president?
Adjectives usually come before what? They come before nouns, that's right.
Mr. Garrison, you can't just act like nothing happened. You're spiraling out of control, and you have to answer to the people.
I don't know what you're talking about. I am a teacher. Okay, adjectives describe nouns, and there are several types of them.
Mr. Garrison.
What are some examples of adjectives you can give me for this sentence? Anybody?
You sold people a line, Mr. Garrison, and you have to make good on it.
The yellow ball, that's a good one. Or we can say the slippery ball, can't we?
Come on.
What else about the ball? No, please. What else can we say about the ball, children? No, please. Leave me alone.
The bouncy ball?
No, I'm not going back, please. They're going to kill me, children. Help me, children. Help me.
At some point, he ran for president and then tried to escape back to being a teacher. But
they did a whole Trump thing with him. So he had like a parody of the Trump thing, and it was based on the idea that Trump himself actually didn't want to win the presidency. He was just a reality TV star who kind of indulged in the popularity of running for president. And basically Mr. Garrison has a similar kind of thing, but he gets up and he always says stuff that he just thinks is absolutely ridiculous and over the top, but will boost his own ego. And people start like lapping it up. And basically they elect him as president. Yeah.
But what do you think of his teaching? Because
it's interesting
because language teachers, and that was actually a grammar lesson.
We actually saw some English language teaching. That was quite funny, wasn't it? Yeah, it was sort of the chalk and talk style of teaching grammar, wasn't it? Deductive. Here you go. We have an adjective. There was a little bit of elicitation, though, wasn't there?
Yeah, no, that's what I was thinking. I was like, because normally, when you get the chalk and talk, they might give examples. But he didn't give any examples, did he? He just kind of went straight into eliciting. No, he did. He said yellow, slippery, and then he asked, but he didn't board any. That was it, right?
Yeah.
And one of them said bouncy.
It's not the worst thing not the worst example we've seen in the world.
No, it's really not, which is ironic. Because we were both
I was not expecting to see it. Yeah, I wasn't expecting to see any teaching in this at all. So, okay.
Okay,
that's
so
a bit of a surprise.
We'll say first one, surprisingly, okay.
it was teaching. Well, I wouldn't say okay, but it was teaching. And what did we see though? Some bad. I mean, he interrupted another teacher's class. That's not on.
Yeah.
Go in and just take over. Yeah.
He didn't greet the children, do some sort of, I don't know, like a warmer, try to contextualize, why why we're talking about adjectives today, or like you tend to put it in some sort of theme, so students can better kind of grasp, like, what is this? If we're gonna start using labels, grammar labels, then when do we use this? That broader context,
Yeah. And getting dragged away by the Secret Service. It's not a good look.
Not a
Avoid.
good look. No, I know you've dealt with this before. Wait.
Yeah. That's why I don't work for International House anymore.
Okay, should we have a look at another clip? What about the one where he learns the alphabet? That kind of is at least a little bit English language teaching related. I think he learns.
So this is him doing learning rather than teaching.
I think he learns and teaches. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, friends. My name is Mr. Sticky Dick in My Bowels. We are going to learn Canadian. With a lot of practice, you're going to find that speaking Canadian isn't so difficult. And in fact, our alphabet and yours are fairly similar. So why don't we begin singing it together? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, W, X, and these are...
Can you confirm if this is true or false, having lived in Canada for some time?
I am technically Canadian, and it is 100% true. 100% true. Although, it's the accent that he uses is more like from the east side, more like Nova Scotia,
East Coast.
The Maritimes, but it's pretty close.
Yeah. To me, the Western Canadians just sound American. Like, they sound kind of San
That's
Francisco.
probably going to be the spiciest thing on this podcast, that you say that. The amount of hate that we're going to get now. Jesus. Well, they're not going to hate. They're just going to passively aggressively dislike us.
No, they'll make some comment like pommies or something.
Says Susie likes hairy balls. What do you think of these? All right, now everyone.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U,
well, he didn't teach the alphabet there. He learned the alphabet of Canada. 100% accurate, 100% true. He didn't seem to like that very much. We've never really talked about alphabet learning as much. What do you think? What do you think?
I think alphabet learning is probably one of the least important things to actually focus on in class. Mm-hmm. Because there's 1,000,001 YouTube videos. It probably is something that realistically you could learn in an afternoon if you wanted to, at basically any age. And although it is useful, when someone says, "How do you spell your surname?" which obviously happens all the time, it is pretty limited beyond that.
Is it something that you cover in your classes? Because I would imagine that, like, if you're a new immigrant, then, you would be dealing with a lot of forms and going to interviews. If you've got a long name that's, that might not be so familiar for someone, like in England, that you'd have to spell that out. So would that not be something that you would practice more?
Absolutely have to do it. There's no doubt about that. But it's very rare that I have it as an actual teaching point in the class. rather even at my level, which I'm teaching entry one, which is technically the first official level, but there is a pre-entry course as well. And I think in pre-entry they actually do that stuff. But at entry one, I don't focus on it like that. I would just give them an activity where they're asking for each other's name and then spelling their names. And I would deal with it based on error correction if there were any issues with it. So I still don't explicitly practice it. And I think one of the reasons why I'm a little bit hesitant to focus a lot on the alphabet is I think that the benefits, which are mainly literacy based benefits, as in someone wants to write your name, so you tell them how to write it, could they might they are important in some contexts, but I'd also be concerned about how there might be some negative transference in terms of how we say the letters compared to how we actually pronounce letters in words.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to over drill the alphabet and then have people trying to kind of bring that across into the language.
Yeah, because
As
that's one
much
of the
for
things that you don't. It's hard to convey, especially at a really low level, that the alphabet is just the alphabet. It's just a way to say the letters. It's not the English language is not phonetic. Basically, it's not how you spell a word is not how you say a word, and sometimes it's a very difficult concept for students when their language is exactly like that. And they've not had any experience with a language that is completely separate because they're like, well, that's completely stupid. And I agree.
even when languages are phonetic, the alphabet doesn't match how you say the sounds anyway.
Yeah, actually, that's true. I know it is.
Like in Spanish in the alphabet they say H for H, but then in words they don't even pronounce the H.
Yeah.
Hola. There's no H. They never pronounce the H, in fact, unless it's the ch sound. And then if you consider that, like that CH sound. No, wait, how do they do ch? Do they have a ch? I'm getting confused now. Chorizo. Yes, they do. And it's CH, yeah. And if you think about CH, you think about the letter C. Well, the letter C, A, B, they say the, but then they say chorizo. So chorizo has nothing to do with te, right? So it's the same even in Spanish, which is relatively phonetic. So the alphabet is pure. It's purely a literal thing. It's a literacy writing. It's all about writing and how do you write or how do you type something. So yeah, and for me, I would say the students that I have, literacy is way more important than for basically any other student groups that I've ever taught. But I still like barely focus on explicitly teaching the alphabet. That's my personal way of dealing with things. I think it just doesn't. I just don't think it fits well, like doing something like that where you just run through the alphabet. I don't think it fits well with a kind of inductive, discovery-based approach to language acquisition.
Yeah, and I think that's the main focus, especially with new learners, is to kind of open the scope of their approach to language learning, in that it's stuff that they can figure out. You're just kind of a guide, a coach to kind of move them along the way, give some lessons, etc. But, the primary thing is that they can do this. They just have to kind of not just sit there. It's not a passive thing. It's something that they should actively be part of. And a lot of people, when it comes to learning, and especially what I've noticed in language learning as you get older, is you're just like, okay, I'm here to learn, teach me. And it doesn't really work that way. You do have to be engaged with the process, and that and the more that you can kind of go inductive, the more there's ownership, and the more that I feel you tend to retain. And
That's
think,
it.
I can't think of studies off the top of my head that back that up, but I know there's literature out there.
Just refer to How Languages Are Learned by Lightbound and Spada, which is the sort of Bible on language acquisition. And the book is so massively, heavily referenced all throughout. And then the go-to people in terms of the academics who focus on this area. Hang on, I actually had these, weirdly enough, I had these noted down recently. Do I still have it? This is purely coincidental. It's just because I did a stream on this subject recently.
On Professor Rich, you can find him.
It was,
on
yeah,
YouTube.
Professor Rich Language Learning. And we were talking about the discovery thing. Yeah, so it's people like Stephen Krashen, James Asher, Paul Nation, Rebecca Oxford, Zoltan Diornier, Jean-Marc Dewalier, Robert Garner, Aneta Pavlenko, John Schumann, Robert DeCasia, Lightbound and Spada. So you can search for the authors, search for their names on an open source articles website, and you'll find articles that they've done. There's lots of research and commentary on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Essentially, the thing is, it's not that teaching another way doesn't work. It's that this way it's something that's more in the hands of the teacher to be able to direct the students to learn in this kind of language acquisition way. Whereas if you do something like a sort of more deterministic way, where you're like, here's the grammar point, this is how it works, practice it, then you're relying on the student then doing a lot of stuff, a lot of kind of study and work themselves. So they're going out the classroom, then they're going to reflect on the class and practice it and implement it. And, you're relying on a kind of a lot of legwork outside the class. Whereas if you can just encourage these habits in the class, the idea is that those habits in the class, it becomes a process that the students will naturally do outside of class. And the idea is it's kind of engaging as well. So it's something that you want to do.
Yeah. I always see it as kind of, there's tracks, ways that we are kind of built as people to learn. And, like if you lean into that, it's like you're swimming with the stream. But if you're doing it another way, you're going against the stream. Eventually you're still going to get shipped out to the ocean, but it's going to take a longer time. Let's wrap this up with one more clip where we actually see him teaching in a broader context.
All right, kids, it is now my job to teach you the theory of evolution.
Oh, boy!
Now, I, for one, think that evolution is a bunch of bull crap, but I've been told I have to teach it anyway. It was thought up by Charles Darwin, and it goes something like this. In the beginning, we were all fish, okay? Swimming around in the water. And then one day, a couple of fish had a retard baby, and the retard baby was different, so it got to live. So retard fish goes on to make more retard babies, and then one day, a retard baby fish crawled out of the ocean with its mutant fish hands, and it had butt sex with a squirrel or something and made this. Retard frog squirrel. And then that had a retard baby, which was a monkey fish frog. And then this monkey fish frog had butt sex with that monkey, and that monkey had a mutant retard baby that screwed another monkey, and that made you. So there you go. You're the retarded offspring of 5 monkeys having butt sex with a fish squirrel. Congratulations.
Well, first of all, let's talk about the teaching. I wonder.
Chalk and talk.
Yeah, well, kind of. Yeah, chalk and talk. Well, it was an explanation. I mean, sometimes a little bit of chalk and talk. You sort of say something, because let's say if in a class someone says, Neil, what's the difference between present perfect and present simple? Like, one way of dealing with that, which probably isn't the worst way in the world, is just to say, well, present perfect does this, and this, present simple does this, and this. You know, it is one way of dealing with, because if you have a question as well, the Inquisition's already there. People want to know the answer. They're kind of motivated by it. So, you know, so sometimes you can have a bit of chalk and talk. So, but yeah, it was chalk and talk. But there was the undertone of, well, not even an undertone. He just obviously said, I don't agree with this. And then went on and taught it in this like really sarky way.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I've done something like that at a very, 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 very minor level. Like if that's 10 out of 10, maybe I've done sort of 1 out of 10 version of that at some point. Like someone's basically asked about something, and I've said, well, it's not really how I teach, but here's the answer. And then kind of go through it and maybe give it a kind of as fair as I can explanation, but along the way, probably throw in a couple of side comments about which, you know, obviously isn't the best way or doesn't really make sense or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I don't think is a good thing, actually. I think teachers should strive to keep their personal perspectives, even in terms of the material they're teaching, should strive to keep their personal perspectives out of it when giving explanations. And language teachers, yes, you know, we are sometimes asked to give our opinion, but I think opinion should always be explicitly given as, this is my opinion, versus here, I'm just telling you what I know about this, and you make your own opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite difficult, especially when you're dealing with topics that there is no right answer to them. So you often have to try and give that play devil's advocate. Not even that's the right term, but to look at all different sides, especially if you're teaching something like history, you can be viewed in many different ways. And I actually think this evolution thing is probably a good example of a concept that's been explained wrong and seem to have stuck. Do you know, like the idea that we evolved from like monkeys is not in that chart form is not quite true, is it? It's more like a family tree, and there's in a distant ancestor there was this like monkey whatever, and then there's one branch for monkeys, one branch for gorillas, one branch for people, and we all evolved in different ways. Do you know, like you've got you know what I'm talking about with the family trees, where rather than this case that, you know, where like we were chimps and then we were gorillas and then we were, you know, like that sort of way. So
yeah,
you know,
we have a shared ancestor.
Yeah, which is not communicated very well in that evolution chart.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So, you know,
I mean,
that's why I always tread gently with these, because there are different ways of seeing it. I could understand why someone like that would be really angry, because you're like, well, I don't want to come from a fish, but you know, you kind of do, but it's not the way that you think.
I think it's he's coming from more of Christian intelligent design. Intelligent design perspective, probably. But you know, the interesting thing about evolution,
even with intelligent design, you know, that's what they say with science. You know, we can explain pretty much the basics of the universe with science, but you just got to give me this one miracle, and that's the Big Bang, right? You know, this
yes,
there's nothing and then there's something.
That's right. Yeah, that's it's a common saying, isn't it?
I'm not so angry when, you know, someone's like, oh, you know, they're very in love with intelligent design, because, you know, and a lot of stuff are just beyond our comprehension. So, you know, if that's the way you want to think, but you know, there are different. I don't know. We're going off on a tangent here. I'm sorry.
No, we're not going off on a tangent. Actually, I think this is bang on point, because what you were saying was that often issues are quite nuanced, and therefore the idea of the teacher kind of being balanced when considering things. The teacher, in a way, has to be the ultimate critical thinker, and then also be a very kind of the perfect teacher, an ultimate critical thinker, but then also very balanced. Because honestly, yeah, if we look at society today, it does very much seem like the dogma is actually attached to this theory of evolution. And the theory of evolution, it's bloody old now. It's it's old. There's a lot of problems with it, and it's very likely that we're going to find that there are problems with it, because there are a lot of things about the theory of evolution which don't make sense. And that doesn't mean that we didn't evolve from other creatures, but the current theory of evolution, based on the idea of random mutations, right? It actually, I mean, think about this. There's a philosophy, there's a thought experiment in philosophy, which involves getting 1 million monkeys with typewriters. And you basically, the question is, how long would it take those monkeys, to produce the complete works of Shakespeare? And you could make it actually a lot simpler than that. You could say, how long would it take those monkeys with typewriters to produce anything comprehensible in English longer than one paragraph? You just got a whole load of monkeys with typewriters. How long is it going to take them to make one paragraph in English? And if you really think about that, it's going to be a really long time. A really long time. Well, genetics and genetic mutations, as far as I understand it, are even more complicated than that. So the idea that you could even go from one bacteria to, a fish in 1 billion years is also it starts to become dubious. Why would it be a fish? Why not just a random blob? And there'd be so many random blobs. And so there's a lot of things that seem a bit odd about it, and there's other problems with the theory of evolution as well. So obviously the theory of evolution, it's a good map. It helps explain a lot of things. It's very useful in biology. But that doesn't mean, that we have to treat it like ultimate truth. And I think that's the point, really. That's the point. Now, obviously, Mr. Garrison there has just come in with his own bias and he's kind of shutting it down, which is the other way of doing it. So you've got teaching the syllabus dogmatically and over criticizing the syllabus with your own dogma. I mean, the point is there has to be some middle ground there where you can encourage the students to employ their own critical thinking and attempt to discover the truth themselves.
Yeah, and I actually think that you get pushback from students as well, not just institutions or people outside institutions or within them, because they will come into a class with knowledge and say, well, no, this is true. If you want to learn English, you've got to learn the grammar. You have to, and
Funny you should say that.
Yeah, but you don't. You will learn it, but you might not learn it explicitly. If you were to just immerse yourself somewhere. But it's the same with. So when you're going into class and they're expecting this absolute truth, it's hard to then switch them to, well, this is as close as we've got right now. But it's not perfect.
Yeah.
There might be scope for some way to look at it in a different way, and it's difficult when you have institutions, because you get institutionalized to the point where you just can't follow along what's in there. And a lot of the stuff that we push on the channel is that inductive way of kind of questioning, of acquiring that information yourself, thinking, okay, this works, I agree with this, this seems to be backed up. But if you come across something that doesn't quite jive with you, maybe look into it a little bit more and learn a bit more about it, and go about it in a different way. Sure, why not?
Yeah, I totally agree, Neil. And I think that was an interesting point about institutions, because I think that institutions seem to have a bias towards people believing one perspective they don't really want, it seems that, they don't really want people to think critically. And, that does seem to be the way that any institution, in fact, or a lot of large institutions anyway, they seem to prefer that idea that there's a zero and there's a one, there's a true, there's a false. And they don't, it's not like if an institution changes, for example, and it becomes the other way, like when you get a political party changing or something like that, then they just go the other way and say, oh no, now it's the zero that's true and the one that's false, rather than addressing the root issue and saying, no, we need to dive into people having a bit more critical thinking for themselves. That's just a pain, isn't it? It's like, oh no, now we're in, let's just say that the one's true and forget about people working it out for themselves. So it's frustrating, actually. And you're absolutely right to talk about how language learning students come in with that expectation, that unrealistic expectation about truth and false and absolute truth and things that are wrong in language, as well as every other subject that they approach. So it's a real uphill battle as a teacher who wants the students to understand that everything's a useful approximation, and some useful approximations are closer to the truth than others. And that's the best way of being able to understand the world. And you have more chance of getting towards the real truth of things by having that approach.
Yeah. Or even just accepting that you will probably never know the real
You will
truth.
Absolutely never know.
Yeah. Actually, no.
Yeah,
that's probably the only absolute truth there is, isn't it? That you'll absolutely never know the absolute truth. I think that's a really good place to kind of start wrapping this up. So along with us kind of diving deeply into the philosophy behind the classroom, prompted by Mr. Garrison, we have a resounding endorsement for Mr. Garrison's methods from Professor Rich and myself, obviously, because of the path that he's just moved us down in his crazy.
I wasn't expecting this podcast to go in this direction, but hey ho, we did get onto something quite deep, really.
Yeah, no.
And I think that there could be a lot to be said about how teachers, how a real good teacher should always be treading the line, not coming down hard on one side or the other, unless that particular coming down on one side or the other comes with a disclaimer. Then I think it's okay. As long as you present something as fairly as you can and then say, right, by the way, my personal take on this is, and then you can do it then. Because I think teachers are humans at the end of the day. You can't expect them to not express their opinion at all.
Yeah, no. It's funny you say humans, but it reminds me of when you ask spicy questions to an AI like ChatGPT, and they have that inbuilt censorship where they say, this person is renowned for blah, 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 this controversial thing, but also they have done this thing as well. So there's an aspect of trying to be balanced. But again, I guess that's better for another podcast. What do you think out there? What did you think of Mr. Garrison's teaching? What do you think about our final thoughts on classroom absolute truths and disclaiming your personal views and giving that balance? Do you agree? How do you approach that in class? Let us know in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe. And Professor Rich is going to take us home with yet another insightful nugget that he will drop upon us right now.
If you just give me a few minutes and then just edit out the pause.
Yes, I will do that.
Insightful nuggets. There's definitely an insightful nugget to be had on this topic related to dealing with, well, any issue really that has one or two sides, which is basically everything. I think it gets down to the core of what a teacher should really be trying to do when you're talking about ways of encouraging critical thinking skills and students to think for themselves. And I think one of the things that bothers me, and it is one of the things that in a way motivates me to think that education needs a shake-up, is that during the 90s, I really feel like there was a lot of buzz, especially the late 90s, a lot of buzz about the idea of really teaching students to think for themselves. And we need people to be more creative, have soft skills, critical thinking, and all this sort of stuff. And then the 2000s came, and for some reason, the whole thing went out the window. And since then, I feel like the direction of travel has been moving towards an idea of this is right and this is why it's right. And I really feel like that's the way a lot of teaching goes now. It's like, this is right, this is why it's right. This is right, this is why it's right. Even to the extent that we see it with essays. Like when I was writing essays, when I first went to university, the essays were almost entirely discursive essays, which is where you present both sides. You present positives and negatives about each side, and then you conclude with your own opinion. And that was even the case with my long essay I did in philosophy, which is 6,000 to 8,000 words. I did it on Aristotle's Metaphysics Theta. I won't bore you with that. But I remember going through that, and, you know, it was almost just second nature to me by that point that, yeah, whatever issue you have, you consider the other side, and you sort of play devil's advocate with yourself. That's kind of what they were training us to do. But even at that point, I felt like the idea was going out of fashion. And then recently, when I taught pre-sessional at university, discursive essays were just touched upon, but the real focus was on something called an argumentative essay. An argumentative essay is where right from the start, you say what the issue is, and then you say what you're going to argue for. And then you spend your essay making the strongest arguments possible to reinforce that point. You can play devil's advocate, but you do it in a way that you're representing the other side in order to say, they might say this, but here's my response. So your devil's advocate thing just becomes a way of beating down opposition arguments. And then when you conclude, your conclusion then is just a summary of all of the amazing points you've made with therefore, I believe I have firmly established that this is the case. So I'm not really sure why that's happened, but I think it's a step in the wrong direction because it's moved us more towards a kind of self-reinforcing rhetorical society rather than a society that's really interested in scientific inquiry. And even terms like scientific inquiry and the scientific method seem to be weighted now, because now when someone says scientific method, what they really mean is the stuff that supports what I think. They don't actually mean the scientific method. And when they say inquiry, they mean reading all of my sources and agreeing with what I think. They don't mean a genuine inquiry. So that's my rather dark summarizing rant on that. And I think it's a topic that we'll probably have to go into again at some point.
Yeah. So those out there, again, comment below, let us know. Are there any examples that you can give of this that you've seen represented in the media, in movies, TV shows, clips, YouTube videos, what have you, that we can look at analyze, and maybe go a little bit deeper into this subject. If you're looking for more information from myself, you can go to teamteacherchina.com. We've got a whole bunch of materials, PowerPoints that you can use instantly in the classroom. We've got a Team Teacher China YouTube channel where we have videos teaching you how to use those materials. Team Teacher English, where we put those materials into a video form for self-study. And Team Teacher Baby, where I take my experience as a teacher and put that into parenting.
And go to youtube.com/Professor Rich to see some English teaching. You can catch me weekly live streams on Oxford Online English YouTube channel. Oh, and also you can do a YouTube search for POG Space UK, and you would get my alpha version of my new gaming channel, which actually just have some trial content on there at the moment. You can email us here at eltunderthecovers@gmail.com if you have anything you'd like to contribute to the show.
Smash that like button, share and subscribe.
And watch 100% of the video and don't click off. Thank you.
Bye.